Hi everyone. Today we'll be continuing our lecture using Screencast-o-Matic. This way you'll be able to listen, review, and watch at your leisure this particular part of the lecture and be able to prepare for class coming up tomorrow. So we're going to continue our discussion of Shakespeare, and we've been discussing the play The Merchant of Venice. Now, one of the big players in this play is Venice itself. So we can look at a modern day map of Venice and see its location not only inside Italy, but inside the Mediterranean Sea and Europe today, but also we'll talk about it at the time as well. And this location is really important because of its distance, not only from London, but because of the people that populated the area, and we'll eventually talk about, continue to talk about our discussion of what we perceive as anti-Semitic rhetoric inside the play, and how that might or might not be true in Shakespeare's time. So we see Venice. Let's look at it modern day, and then we can talk about it in the time it happened. If we look at Venice's location here, we see that it's part of the Mediterranean Sea, but it's also a gateway for a lot of trade and access to Europe of the time. And moving shipments by boat was one of the big ways of doing that. So it allowed for not only trade, but movement of peoples from everywhere along the Mediterranean Sea. Now, this is important because Venice, being fairly cosmopolitan for the time, had a lot of different people that populated the area, everywhere from the Middle East to Africa, and possibly even Spain and a few other places. And if we look at a map of the time period, we see Venice would be located right around here, and Shakespeare at the time would be writing his plays here in London. Okay? Now, when it comes to that Venice at the time, it's fairly exotic, and Shakespeare ends up using a lot of places in Italy as space for the exotic or the foreign. We see Venice, but also Padua comes up in a number of different plays. Venice comes up in another play as well, Othello. And then we see Verona. These are all, Mantua, are all places where Shakespeare has set different plays, Romeo and Juliet, and a few others. And because of that, well, not because of that. Now we see that this distance between London here and Venice here might seem small on this map, but if we look to a modern map and look at the distance between the two, we see that it's a little over 1,500 kilometers to get there. Not only is that a long distance, but it would take days of travel by horse. It would actually take 10 days of travel non-stop without resting the horse or the person riding to get from London to Venice, and that doesn't include the travel by boat over this area, over the English Channel. So Shakespeare's interaction with folks from that area would be limited, and his understanding of folks of this area around Venice, we can go back to this map, this area around Venice would be limited to travelers and sailors that would either traverse across land to London or sail around through the Straits of Gibraltar and back up to the United Kingdom, or England at the time, and London. So these stories pass through sailors, so he's using these stories as he's producing these plays. Now, in class we've been talking about some of the anti-Semitic rhetoric that we have coming from, that we see possibly inside inside the plays being produced in London by Shakespeare. But his interaction with any Jews would be 0 to none because of his location here in London. So we argue that this distance put between him and the people that he's talking about would make the anti-Semitic rhetoric inside the play not deliberate. And when I say that, I mean that it could be any non-Christian person that could have had these same slings and arrows levied against them as they were levied against Shylock. Now, the other argument is that Shakespeare grew up as a Christian, and for a lot of people, the only widespread written piece of work that was maybe not in every household, but in a number of households, would be the Bible. Now, as a Christian, yes, the focus is going to be on the New Testament, but the Hebrew Testament would also have been a focus. So we could also make the second argument that due to his upbringing as a Christian, that he would have a more than cursory understanding of the Hebrew Testament, and due to that, he would know a good deal about Judaism and would seek to have that fulfillment that Christians see in Jesus be fulfilled for Shylock, as we see at the end of the play, in his conversion to Christianity. So, to review, Venice being an exotic area, having a lot of different folks, and we see that the two arguments for the anti-Semitic nature that we perceive in the play, one could be because of Shakespeare's lack of interaction with Jews of the time, again only hearing secondhand stories through sailors and other travelers, leaves us to believe that the intentional anti-Semitism would be out of consideration. Shylock could have been a part of any non-Christian group and would have received the same treatment. And secondly, Shakespeare's Christian upbringing would have given him more than a cursory knowledge of the Hebrew tradition. With this in mind, we could argue that the anti-Semitic voice in the play is deliberate with the goal of celebrating Shylock's conversion from Judaism to Christianity in the end. So taking this into account, what I'd like you to do this evening is to review different sections of the play and find 2 to 3 textual clues that would support one of the 2 above arguments. And I want you to be prepared in class to share and defend your ideas so that we can have a fervent discussion in class. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you tomorrow.